A girl goes missing from a small lake community in North Carolina, and both her mother and stepfather have been charged with failing to report her missing. They both tell conflicting stories to the authorities. Both have had trials and been sentenced. But where is Madalina? A mother from the same area of the state leaves her job early one morning in 2012 because she isn't feeling well. She calls a friend to pick her up nearby. For reasons unknown, she begins walking instead of waiting for her ride and disappears. A 53-year-old man with health issues disappears along with his vehicle from his apartment complex, leaving behind his cell phone, wallet, and important medications. Did he suffer a medical emergency that caused him to become disoriented? And police are seeking leads for an unsolved double homicide that occurred in South Carolina in 1983, and the crime appears to have been personal. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the two states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years, from murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters. Some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 101, Madalina Cojocari, Crystal Morrison, Marty Teague, Lisa Thompson, and Russell Anthony. Last month, the trial of 62-year-old Christopher Palmater, the stepfather of missing Cornelius girl Madalina Cojocari, began. He was charged with failing to report 11-year-old Madalina missing. Madalina's mother, 39-year-old Diana Cojocari, pleaded guilty of the same charge last month and has already been released for time served. I've discussed this case in episode 52 and also a few weeks ago in episode 99. Palmater chose to have a jury decide his fate rather than plead guilty. For reasons unknown, the defense team for Palmater released Diana from her subpoena, so she was not required to testify at this trial. In my opinion, a very different picture emerged of this case after Palmater's trial. Madalina Cojocari was last seen getting off the school bus at her home in Cornelius, North Carolina on November 21, 2022. Her mother said she last saw the girl on the evening of November 23rd around bedtime. On November 24th, Christopher Palmater drove to his brother's home in Michigan to recover some items after he said he had an argument with his wife. Madalina was not reported missing until late December, when a school guidance counselor became concerned when Madalina's mother refused to bring her to the school. The school had called both parents and left voicemails inquiring about Madalina's whereabouts, and those calls were ignored. Both her mother, Diana Cojocari, and her stepfather, Christopher Palmater, were charged with failure to report a child missing. Their home in Cornelius has been searched multiple times by law enforcement. Here are some details that came out at the trial. Palmater says he didn't realize she was missing for at least a month. Whenever he would ask his wife where Madalina was, Diana would say she was in the bathroom or in her bedroom. Because he worked out of town and had a long commute, he often left the house early and returned around 7:30 p.m. each night. Madalina had been in the habit of eating dinner in her bedroom. Diana Cojocari is from the Eastern European country of Moldova, and the two met through an online dating site called Global Ladies in 2008. He traveled to Moldova in 2010 to meet Diana in person, and Madalina had not been born yet. But the girl is not Palmater's biological daughter. They lost contact for several years, but then she and Madalina traveled to the United States to visit him in 2015. They had 90 days to get married, or she would have to return to Moldova. They were married in early 2016, but Palmater testified that they were never physically intimate. Christopher Palmater's younger brother Matthew, who lives in South Carolina, testified in the trial. He said Diana controlled anything related to Madalina. He felt like his older brother acted more as a babysitter or a person in charge of Madalina's entertainment. Diana was the one who called all the shots. He told the jury that Diana had begun to grow more spiritual, began speaking of fighting demons, sometimes performing loud chanting rituals in the middle of the night. She also spoke of having conversations with and seeing angels. And as this behavior progressed, she was not paying a lot of attention to her daughter. Madalina would ask Palmer to do things like take her to the park and go on bike rides through the neighborhood, and he complied. It appears in the months before Madalina went missing, Diana was asking relatives if they would be willing to take her daughter in. She was also telling people she was in fear for her life, and it wasn't from her husband. Palmer's older brother Paul, who lives in Michigan, said Christopher and Diana made 2 separate visits to his home in May of 2022. Diana was dressed as if she was trying to disguise herself and asked for his family's help in hiding Madalina and Diana because Diana said there were people from her past tracking her. She asked what the local schools were like and talked about moving there with her daughter. Not long after, Christopher Palmer told his brother he was fearful of having to care for Madalina on his own in the event something were to happen to Diana. Paul Palmer admitted he was nervous about getting involved if Diana's story was true and she had the Russian mafia trying to find her, but he told his brother Christopher he was fine to help care for Madalina as long as it was done legally. Detective Gina Patterson with the Cornelius Police Department testified that during a search of the family's home, they found receipts showing Diana had wired thousands of dollars to her mother in Moldova through Western Union, as well as a church or priest located in that area, in December 2022. This search also turned up $7,500 in cash in Diana's purse, along with passports connected to Moldova and Romania. A knife was found in her car. Detective Patterson said Diana made several trips to western North Carolina between December 2nd and 15th. She was stopped by a deputy in Madison County and was also seen on various surveillance videos. It appears her car was in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee during that time as well. Christopher Palmer clarified during the trial that this big argument on November 22nd, 2022 was about a coffee mug. He said the mug had a snowflake on it, and Madalina Cojocari felt there should not be any symbols, such as snowflakes, in the home. He said the argument escalated to Diana taking the mug and other plates and bowls and smashing them in the trash can. Palmer said Madalina Cojocari acted paranoid about Bailey Middle School, where Madalina was enrolled as a student. He testified that Diana thought her daughter was being watched in an effort to be trafficked. She felt the public school was indoctrinating children. In 2022, he explained his wife felt that Russian entities were monitoring their cell phones. Christopher Palmer recalled to the court Madalina Cojocari feared they were being monitored by Russian President Vladimir Putin and late pop star Michael Jackson. As part of his testimony, Palmer told the jury, "I think Diana took her somewhere with her Moldovan family." He also said, "I believe Diana has tucked her away somewhere where she's not going to be found." A jury found him guilty on the charge of failure to report a child missing. He was sentenced to 30 months of supervised probation. Christopher Palmer has filed for divorce from Madalina Cojocari. Anyone with information on the whereabouts of Madalina Cojocari, who would be 13 years old now, is asked to call the Cornelius Police Department at 1-704-892-7773. Another missing persons case from my area of the state has been resolved, but there are still questions remaining about the outcome. On August 23, 2012, 31-year-old Crystal Morrison was at her place of employment in Concord when she started feeling poorly. She worked at Connections Recruiting on Corporate Drive. She called a man family described as a close friend and asked him to come and pick her up at a gas station near her job. But when he arrived, Crystal was no longer there. Co-workers and other eyewitnesses reported they had seen Crystal walking down International Drive before turning onto Highway 73 near Interstate 85. Police verified that Crystal walked past the Mistletoe Ridge neighborhood, but no one saw her after she passed the Water's Edge apartments near Winecoff School Road. Police searched the areas surrounding the places Crystal had been seen and followed up on more than 100 tips, but they still turned up no sign of Crystal. Her sister, Michelle Carey, told the local media that she didn't understand why Crystal would have been walking after she left the office when she had called for a ride. Crystal had asthma and she hadn't been feeling well. The two sisters were close, having lost their mother at ages 14 and 9. Their father, Rick Morrison, raised them and he called Crystal a daddy's girl. She left behind an 8-year-old son and had been a single parent, which also perplexed her family. Crystal had been looking forward to her son starting 3rd grade in his fall baseball season. Police found nothing of value at Crystal's workplace, and her bank and credit cards showed no activity after she left. When she went missing, she was described as wearing a white top with a black floral print, black pants, and black heels. Crystal had reddish blonde hair and stood about 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighed around 100 pounds. On December 9th, 2019, a survey crew came across skeletal remains on Highway 73 near the intersection of Winecoff School Road. Dental records confirmed the remains to be those of Crystal Morrison. The place where she was found was less than a mile from where she was last spotted by eyewitnesses. Crystal's father, Rick, had hired a private investigator named Kevin Ryan to look into his daughter's disappearance. After Crystal's remains were identified in 2020, Ryan told the Charlotte Observer that the area Crystal was found in had been searched twice, so it was a shock to the family when she was located there. He also said he believed her death was likely due to a medical issue, as Crystal hadn't been feeling well and had been on foot near the place where she was found after she left her workplace. No other updates on this case have been made available to the public. Reading about Crystal's case made me remember the story of a man named Marty Teague who went missing from his home in Statesville in the summer of 2018. By all accounts, 53-year-old Marty was a creature of habit. According to an article that ran in the Statesville Record and Landmark, he liked eating bologna sandwiches for lunch and hot dogs with tater tots for dinner. He also liked watching reruns of The Andy Griffith Show and visiting his apartment complex's pool as often as he could. Once a month, he would take his daughters and grandchildren out to eat. He often spoke with his children daily. They had lost their mother 10 years prior, so Marty was their only parent left. July 24, 2018 was the last time he was seen at his apartment complex. He vanished along with his 1994 forest green Jeep Cherokee. After 2 days of not hearing from her father, his daughter Kansas Bonanno went to his home at the Mallard Creek Apartments and persuaded his apartment manager to let her inside. Her father, a white male with gray hair and blue eyes, weighing around 220 pounds, wasn't there, but he left behind his money and medications. She told the media her father suffered from high blood pressure, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and was borderline diabetic. In the weeks after he went missing, there was no activity on his bank cards and none of his medications were refilled. His friends and family couldn't believe no one in the area had reported seeing Marty or his car. They began a grassroots campaign of printing out flyers and passing them out in the community. On August 30th, 2019, a year after he went missing, Marty's Jeep was located on an abandoned piece of property off Seine Road, east of the Statesville city limits. The area was approximately 5 miles away from his home. There was no sign of Marty near the car. On February 17, 2020, local police received a call about possible human remains near the end of Seine Road, about 50 yards from where Marty's car had been found. From what I can tell, the area included a lot of overgrowth of vegetation, so searching for Marty had been difficult. His family later confirmed the remains were those of Marty, and no cause of death was released. I'm wondering if, like Crystal Morrison, Marty Teague had a medical emergency, drove away in his car, became disoriented, where he ended up on the abandoned property. I know his family was relieved to have closure, but I also know it doesn't seem like the initial investigation moved very quickly, and it took the work of his friends and family to really help spread the word of Marty's disappearance. Even now, when you search the case, you'll only find a handful of news articles, and most of those are related to him being found. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your work, Well Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. All written materials and resources are provided by me. I'll also give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll also post a link in the show notes. Here's your friendly PSA that if you haven't been using the skincare products from SkinX Erin, you might be doing it wrong. But it's never too late to do the right thing. The pre-cleanse oil is the best way, in my opinion, to thoroughly melt away excess makeup, sunscreen, environmental pollutants, and residual product buildup from your skin without stripping. I use their pre-cleanse oil every morning and night, followed by my daily cleanser for fresh skin. And here's another tip for the upcoming summer season. Before you go out in the sun, apply the hydrating beauty oil because it helps rehydrate the skin, reduces inflammation, and repairs the skin barrier. After spending the day in the sun, the Perfecting Night Oil accelerates healing, prevents peeling, and can quickly help a burn turn into a tan overnight. Try it. Go ahead and treat yourself with 10% off your order using my code MissingCarolinas10. I'll put a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. Finally, I'd like to close out this episode with a cold case from South Carolina. On Sunday, May 15, 1983, police in Lancaster County received a call around 2 a.m. about a burning car parked in an abandoned lot near US 521 in Heath Springs. Once they arrived on the scene, they discovered the body of a young woman on the passenger side of the front seat and a male victim in the trunk of the car. The area had been patrolled about an hour earlier by the Heath Springs police chief, and he reported no car had been there then. The male victim was later identified as 19-year-old Russell Anthony, and the burned vehicle was his maroon and white 1974 Chevy Malibu. The woman in the front seat was 19-year-old Lisa Ann Thompson. The preliminary autopsy pointed to carbon monoxide poisoning from the car fire, but police believed both victims were already unconscious when the fire started. Later, it was determined that Lisa had been shot twice in the chest with a high-caliber pistol. There was no gun found at the scene. Russell did not appear to have been harmed and was likely locked in the trunk alive. Police didn't search the trunk at first, so it was some time before his body was discovered. Police didn't believe robbery was a motive, as Russell's wallet containing a small amount of money and a watch were found on his body. Lisa and Russell were both students at Andrew Jackson High School, and their family said they'd been dating off and on for about a year. On the Saturday night before the murder, Lisa had worked at the Kettle restaurant in Kershaw until around 11 p.m. She went home, changed, and was picked up around midnight. Her mother couldn't confirm who had picked Lisa up, but the family assumed it was Russell. The month prior, Russell's tires had been slashed, and a former boyfriend of Lisa's was charged in the incident. The Heath Springs Police Department only had one employee, so it joined forces with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Department to investigate the double homicide. They tracked down what leads they could, including finding the person who had reported the burning vehicle, but the case went cold, despite the local community raising funds so a reward could be offered in exchange for information. Dateline recently put out updated reporting on this case, as it has been more than 41 years since the couple was murdered. Lisa's family said she was the only daughter out of 4 siblings, a popular student at school, and a caregiver. She enjoyed having a good time and listening to popular music, including artists like Prince, Michael Jackson, Dionne Warwick, and watching Soul Train. She served as the Sunday school secretary for their church. Russell was also known as friendly and helped drive one of the school buses part-time. A friend of Russell's, named Marty Sims, told Dateline he's always believed the murder was personal and not a random act of violence because the area where they were found was so rural. The Lancaster County Sheriff told Dateline early on a person of interest in the case had been established, but there was never enough physical evidence to connect that person to the case. He also said that over the years, they've continued to conduct interviews, and a new person of interest has been discovered and is currently being investigated. Anyone who has information about the deaths of Lisa Thompson and Russell Anthony is asked to call the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office at 803-283-3388. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Like what you hear? You can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com, Renee Robertson. Do you know of a missing persons case in North or South Carolina that you think should be covered? Email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. And don't forget to check out our sponsor, WOW Women on Writing, and the great programs and writing contests they have to support writers at wow-womenonwriting.com. Treat yourself to a skincare kit from SkinX Erin with my code, MissingCarolinas10. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. Sound editing is provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.